Today we're going to talk about 4.4, the Siege of Boston and the Battle of Long Island, New York. So a reminder, the Siege of Boston happened before the U.S. declared their independence from Great Britain. So the Declaration of Independence has not been signed yet, has not been created yet. It will be signed and created right before the Battle of Long Island. So for the Siege of Boston, think about before the U.S. declared their independence. The Siege of Boston. So if you remember, a siege is to surround something, not allow anything in or out, no supplies. And this is a very good war tactic. We talked about the last year. You talked about the siege at the Alamo by Santa Anna, and we will later talk about the siege of Yorktown. We'll talk about the siege at Vicksburg in the Civil War. So a siege is a military tactic that is surround everything, not allow anything in or out. So very good strategy. So Siege of Boston. Shortly after the Battle of Bunker Hill, George Washington is going to go to Boston with the Continental Army. And at the time, the British are controlling Boston. So mostly just redcoats living there. There are some patriots, but mostly redcoats and loyalists. Now, George Washington is going to contact Henry Knox. Henry Knox is an American that is at Fort Ticonderoga, and he's going to send word to Henry Knox to bring the cannons from Fort Ticonderoga to Boston and to help with the siege. And so Henry Knox and his men are going to travel 300 miles. So to give you a reference, that's from about Wichita Falls, Texas, which is North Texas, to Austin, Texas. And that's going to take him 56 days. And it's a pretty quick trip, considering that it is the middle of December and January when he makes this 300-mile journey, pushing and dragging these cannons with horses or just people. It's very tough. It's very impressive that he made it in only 56 days. So on the night of March 6, 1776, Washington moved his army and cannons to Dorchester Heights, overlooking Boston. And this is within striking distance of the Boston Harbor. So we've talked about the siege before and how it was unsuccessful early on because the British could still get their warships in and out of the harbor of Boston. So they could still get supplies in and out. They could still get people in and out. But now Washington is trying to cut off the Boston Harbor to successfully place the siege. So here are where these stars are. This is Dorchester Heights. And this is going to be an elevated place that overlooks Boston, not far at all. Here's Boston here, okay, the city of Boston. And they're going to put these cannons here on Dorchester Heights, not allow any ships in or out of the harbor, and they're going to be able to shoot cannons into the city of Boston. Now, all these other little blue things, this represents soldiers and cannons around the outside, and they're able to reach the outskirts of Boston, but they can't reach the center of Boston. It's too far away. So by getting cannons on Dorchester Heights, this hill right here, they're able to shoot cannons into the center of Boston to where now the redcoats feel threatened. So on March 7th, 1776, British General Howe is forced to evacuate Boston, and he's going to get on his boat, and they're going to go south along with the redcoats. They're going to go south to New York City. Now, he's going to surrender. And he's going to tell George Washington, he's going to wave his flag, and then he's going to meet with George Washington. And he's going to tell George Washington, if you allow me and my soldiers to evacuate Boston safely, then we will not burn down the city of Boston. Okay, and George Washington is going to agree and say deal. And reminder that this is before the Declaration of Independence was signed. If the Declaration of Independence was already signed, Washington probably could have said no, and they could have won the war right there. Okay, but instead, the Declaration of Independence has not been signed, had not been created, and so Washington did not want the city of Boston burned to the ground, and so he allows General Howe to get on his boat along with the redcoats and evacuate Boston. So here's a good video that you can watch on YouTube if you want. There's the link below if you want to watch that. It's a good video. Now, going back on this video, it shows how George Washington gets his cannons into Dorchester Heights here. So here's Dorchester Heights here, And George Washington's going to get his extra cannons from Fort Ticonderoga. They're going to put hay bales here in the middle of the night to block the road. They're going to put hay bales there and then around this way. And now George Washington is able to order his men to drag these cannons behind the hay bales and under darkness and get these cannons to Dorchester Heights. Now, they also use these other cannons around the outside here. They use them to shoot into the city of Boston, and they're going to do that for 2 days. And this is going to basically cancel out all the noise to where these people can move the cannons to Dorchester Heights without being heard. And also, it's going to take the British, it's going to take their focus is going to be on these cannons here, and they kind of just forget about Dorchester Heights. And that's going to allow George Washington and his men to move these cannons into Dorchester Heights overnight. And the next morning, General Howe is going to wake up and see that these cannons are here, and they're in a great place to where they can just bombard Boston and the harbor, and the boats are no longer safe. And so General Howe realizes that they must evacuate. They must surrender. So it is very impressive of what George Washington and his men were able to do at the Siege of Boston to finally complete it. Battle of Long Island, New York. So General Howe is going to leave Boston and go down to New York City. So June 1776, General Howe's army arrives in New York by ship. Okay, this is before the Declaration of Independence was created. Okay, it's going to be later the next month. The Declaration of Independence was created. The ships carried thousands of redcoat troops and signaled a shift in fighting from the New England to the Middle States. In August of 1776, the Battle of Long Island signaled the beginning of tough times for the Continental Army. So you have George Washington here on the left, the U.S. Army Commander General. And George Washington had fewer than 20,000 troops, and they were poorly trained, and he had no navy at the time. Where Redcoat General William Howe had 34,000 redcoats who were professional troops and 10,000 of the best sailors in the world. So George Washington has no advantage here. General Howe and the redcoats have the best advantage. So can you guess the results of what happens at the Battle of Long Island? The results, when the fighting ended at Long Island, 1,400 Americans were killed, wounded, or captured. Washington was forced to retreat north in order to avoid being captured by the British. Okay, so him and some of his men are going to escape north, and they're going to retreat. They're going to run from the redcoats, and the redcoats are going to chase him. So it's going to turn into a cat and mouse game. The redcoats are the cat, and George Washington and the U.S. Army, they're the mouse. They're running from the redcoats.